Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to We Need to Talk About This. I am your host, Chuck Oliveris, and this is episode 22. We did not have an episode last week. I skipped one due to the loss of my father. He passed away exactly 1 week ago, and so I decided I wasn't going to do a podcast. I just needed a minute to kind of get through that, as we all do when these things happen. So this podcast 22, is kind of a dedication to my father and a celebration of life. And I just kind of wanted to share with everyone that knows me or that has ever known him just a little bit about his life and, you know, kind of share the stuff he did and things that maybe you didn't know about him. So he was born on June 19th, 1940. He was 84 when he passed away. Had a good run, had a great life. Was a musician most of his life, worked on the waterfront. We had a very large family, very musical family. Um, my uncles, my father were all musicians. So all of us kind of took part in that as well. The family events at our Nana and Papa's house were always huge, with cousins and neighbors and family, and the band would set up in the backyard and play. And of course, everybody wanted to come and be there. And those people that know me and grew up around me knew my father very well, and my family. They were always very welcoming. So I thought I'd share a little bit of his life with you, because it was a pretty interesting one. My father was a great father, a lot of fun, very, very sweet, very kind, and beloved by a lot of people. So many more people than I realized until his recent passing, when we started reading posts on social media and stuff. I knew he knew a lot of people, and a lot of my friends had met him as I was growing up over the years. So it was just interesting to see all the reactions and stuff. So my father was he was a young guy when he got married. He married my mother when he was 19 years old. For those of you on YouTube, here's a picture of him and my mother at 19. So they got married, lived right down the street from each other, and they had three of us kids at that time. Myself, my sister Teresa, and my sister Julia. And we lived behind a little grocery store in the East Bay in Castro Valley, California. And there was a grocery store named Romley's there. And it was there for years. And as kids, we grew up in a house behind that store. So, and I've told this story before, but it's that whole thing of young innocence. We'd play outside at night till it got dark, or mom would say until the parking lights came on at the grocery store, then you got to come in the house. So they were very young when they had us three kids. Dad was working, I believe, at Thrifty Warehouse. So Thrifty was a drugstore. Thrifty Warehouse was a big warehouse, obviously, for all the drugstore chains of the Thrifty stores. And Dad got a job there through my grandfather, my mother's father, who was Charles Chili DeWardy. And I should probably do a podcast in his honor someday. My grandfather was the president of the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union in the Bay Area. And he was actually up for Jimmy Hoffa's job at one point in his life. In any case, he got my father a job at the Thrifty Warehouse because he was young and needed a job, and mom and him were having kids and so forth. And there's just a little story I want to tell about that, because my grandfather, the union was very strong at that time, obviously Teamsters. But there was a day when they tried to terminate my father. And I don't remember what the circumstances were, but he called my grandfather and said, "Hey, they're letting me go." And my grandfather said, "Bullshit." And I guess the story goes that Grandpa walked down there with a couple other union officials and himself, and told them to put my dad back to work. And they said, "No, we're not going to do that." So I guess my grandfather turned around and whistled at everybody in the warehouse to follow him out. And every employee in that warehouse started walking behind my grandfather and my dad out of the building. And then they were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute." And they gave Dad his job back and put everybody back to work. But I always thought that was kind of an interesting story. And Dad loved telling that. But he was quite young at the time, of course, probably did something stupid, but Grandpa got his job back for him. In those days, it was a lot different for the unions. So Thrifty Warehouse kind of started his career there. He always started playing music when he was young. Piano, of course, keyboards mostly. It's an old story that when he was 19 and he had his paper route, when he married mom, he had a paper route. And he would do that paper route and save all his money from that on the side. And he bought himself a baby grand piano. That baby grand piano lasted through the years as we were kids growing up. And then at some point, as we got older, it moved through the family. And I'm not sure why, but my godfather, Frank Silva, had it for a little while. I believe my cousin Johnny Kendall had it out in his house for a while. In any case, as the years went by, that piano ended up making its way back to my dad, and he had the whole thing refinished. And I'll show you that a little further down in the podcast because it sits in his living room now. Beautiful baby grand piano we grew up with, and one of the great things we loved about Dad is listening to him play that. Get a little Pepsi there. So they had the three of us kids. Dad was playing music. He played in a lot of bands out of high school with my Uncle Dan, his youngest brother. They had quite a few bands through the years. One of their schoolmates, Glenn Freshy, who ended up being, he's like an uncle to me. They played together out of high school and stuff and did a lot of gigs. And Glenn ended up joining their band years later and stuff. Here's a quick shot of him and my mother during the married days when we lived, I believe it was on Keith Avenue in Castro Valley up in the East Bay. And so that's kind of an old nostalgic picture there. And my dad was always a very, very handsome man. I used to kid all the time and tell everybody like he looked like a movie star all the time because he really did. He was very handsome. He's the only guy I know who could take a license picture at the DMV and have it come out looking like $1 million. I always came out very, very dark or Armenian looking or something, but Dad always looked like $1 million. And we used to tease him about that all the time. This is a shot of him at his piano there. So this is at our old house. If you look in the background there, for those of you that are on YouTube, you can see the old stereo system and TV in the background there. That's definitely 70s there. And that's Dad sitting at his piano. And I'm tripping a little bit off this. He's probably drinking scotch right there. He's got some music on the stand there on the piano. And I remember that little crystal candle over his shoulder. My mother had 2 of those. Crystal was real big in the 70s. So everybody was buying it and they had their little crystal parties and stuff, kind of like Tupperware. But there's the piano there. And of course, years later, that would move around the family and he'd end up getting it back. One of my favorite pictures of myself and my dad when I was young is this picture right here. I'm going to show you. So there's Dad and me in our little tuxedos with the frillies and all that. This is at my Uncle Danny's first wedding. He married my Auntie Nadine in our little town of Castro Valley there in her parents' backyard, and I got to be the ring bearer. And so that's me and my dad there, and it's one of my favorite shots of me and my father to this day. And one of the ones I'll never get rid of. And look at my beautiful hair. Of course, the Oliveras family were huge Raider fans. So Dad, my papa, my Uncle Dan, my Uncle Ron, all of our friends were season ticket holders for the Oakland Raiders. And that was back in the day, Al Davis and even further back than that. But it was a big, big deal. So my whole family would take the motor home that my grandparents had. And we would go to the Oakland Coliseum and people would tailgate and stuff. And we would also have drinks and barbecue and stuff like that. But avid Raider fans for years. My dad was so pissed when they moved him the first time. Those of you watching YouTube, you check out that ashtray he's got in front of him at the bar there. That's actually in what we used to call the rumpus room at my Nana's house. And you can see there's a Raider pennant back there. And I had every one of those in my room as a kid. But there's Dad, and he was very fit at that time because he was going to the gym and stuff. But check out those sideburns. I love that picture. So the Raider games were definitely part of the family thing all the way up until the end. My father was a Raider fan, of course. And so as the years went by, Dad started playing more music, even though he got a job on the waterfront through my grandfather. And he made most of his career working on the waterfront for quite a while. And I used to go to work with him as a little kid. And one of the things I always respected about my father was he didn't cuss a lot. And if he did, it wasn't around us kids. And I remember that one time the union was on strike and Dad wanted me to go down to the docks with him to the waterfront because he said, we're on strike. I got to pass out these flyers. Why don't you go with me? You know, you got nothing to do. So I go with my dad, and here's all these Teamsters with cigars and big old truck drivers and shit. And they didn't see me in the car right away. And they'd be like, Willie, what the fuck are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Fuck this and fuck that. And my father would be like, hey, my kid's in the car. And I just always respected that about my dad. It didn't help because I still swear like a sailor myself because my mother was more foul-mouthed than my father ever was. And, you know, she grew up in a Teamster family, so that's just the way they spoke. But it was a lot of fun going to work with Dad. And I remember on the Port of Oakland, Dad's office is almost like it was almost like a movie set when you went into it. It was a big old wooden office, and there were a million desks and chairs, and you had customs across the hall where my Uncle Bill was a customs agent. And then my dad's office and some other guys he worked with for years there, Frank Silva being one of them, my godfather. But I remember when Dad would take me to work, there was a little restaurant, and you'd come out of the dock office and go down a little incline. There was like a little, I want to say a cafe. And there was this very, very sweet black lady that worked in there every morning. And every time my father would take me into that little cafe, she would make me a hot chocolate with whipped cream and everything. And she would just get excited about doing it for me every time. So memories as a kid on the waterfront with my father, it was that lady and that hot chocolate. I think I was actually able to see that woman when I got a little older. So it was kind of a treat. So when Dad got done, he actually stayed on the waterfront for years while he played music on the side with my uncles, and they formed their bands and stuff. They had another school friend, Steve Freeberg, Schwen, we call him. Here's a picture here. And this is from the Stockton Inn, from a newspaper up in Stockton, California. It says special attraction, 1 week only, Friday and Saturday, August 31st, September 1st, 9 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. The Shelters, which was the band's name, direct from San Francisco for the special show, a new sound for the Stockton Inn. So the Stockton Inn was a fairly popular hotel at the time, and they were kind of famous for having live music and stuff. But anyway, Dad and my uncles got booked into that gig, and that was one of their first beginnings of moving around and starting to play in different places. As a matter of fact, the picture I'm showing now, it shows the guys all sitting in an old-fashioned car. I know it's kind of small, maybe you can't see it. But the story on this picture is that photo was taken at a place called the Dunsmuir Mansion in Oakland, California. They had done a wedding there, and then they had done some promotional shots in the swimming pool and stuff like that at that mansion. And this particular picture was one of the shots they used for a while. So the Stockton Inn was pretty cool. And I remember when they were playing that there quite a few years ago. In the front seat there, you got my Uncle Dan, you got Glenn Freshy, Uncle Glenn, my dad in the back next to Steve with the hat on. And I just think that's really cool, the old newspaper clipping. But the guys got so popular in the Bay Area for their music. It was mostly like pop hits and stuff at the time. This is 70s, right? And they grew to be, I should say, one of the biggest, most popular dance bands that moved around the Bay Area before they started traveling other places. There was a little lounge down in San Leandro, California called Nick's Cocktail Lounge. Here's a little flyer of them again. Another promotional shot, dancing and entertainment Thursday through Friday, 9 p.m. until whatever. But there is my Uncle Dan on the left, and then my father there with his hands folded on his knee in the middle. And then next to him is my Uncle Ron, and then my Uncle Jimmy on the end there, who was the drummer. There were different variations to the Shelters over the years. Some people would come and go, but mostly it was the three brothers and then usually another guy or two. But I remember this Nick's Lounge because it was right on the border of San Francisco or San Leandro and Oakland. So it was a very popular lounge at the time, and later became one of Tommy T's comedy clubs, which were kind of famous around the Bay Area. and later grew even more. Another clipping I wanted to show you. This is from a club called the Rendezvous Entertainment Lounge. And you can see in this picture, they're a little bit more dolled up with their little jumpsuits here and their bow ties. This always cracks me up. It says now through April 1st, the Shelters. And it says a great musical group playing in the kind of music everybody likes to dance to and come and see. Now playing for dancing. And this was a big deal for them because the Rendezvous was located out in Fremont, California. And it was one of the newer clubs. It was big. It was a little fancier than some of these little hole in the walls that they had started playing in. And their popularity was already growing. So they were moving around quite a bit as it was. But when they got this gig out there in Fremont at the Rendezvous, it was a big deal because that club had just opened and they wanted a good headlining band in there. And my dad and my uncles were so popular. And I think one of the things that made them so popular was their vocals, being brothers. They had great harmonies. All of them could sing lead. Dad had his songs. Uncle Ronnie wrote and also sang his songs. And Uncle Danny was kind of the baritone who played bass, and he could sing other things as well. One of the classic black and white shots of the band is right here. This, again, is another newspaper clipping. And this one says, let's see where they at here. This was another newspaper ad for them at one of the clubs in the East Bay. They were coming to, the Galaxy Lounge. So the Galaxy Lounge, there's a story to this one. First of all, I want to look at this picture. You see my dad on the front, down front there on the left, my Uncle Ron with the guitar on the right, above him, my Uncle Dan with his bass. And then that's Glenn Freshy, Uncle Glenn, with his drums there. So Glenn, if you can't tell already, he kind of looks like Elvis Presley a little bit, doesn't he? Well, he was a huge Elvis Presley fan. Later on in the years, Glenn decided to do an Elvis impersonation act as part of their show everywhere they went. And I have to tell you, he was one of the best Elvis entertainers I've ever seen. Uncle Glenn took it very seriously. He was a huge fan of Elvis. He lived his life like him. He dressed like him. He wore jewelry like Elvis did. And he actually made every single one of his jumpsuits to do the Elvis show. And in a little bit, I'll show you a picture of him in one of my favorite suits, but he had a bunch of them. And he made them all by hand with his own hands. And they were cool. And I remember him when we were going through the casino circuit in Nevada, playing all these different casinos. They had given us an old Victorian home to stay in. And we stayed in that house. It was right across the street from the casino the guys were playing at. I think I was maybe 14 or 15. But Glenn would have to run back to the house halfway through the night and put on his Elvis gear and stuff. And I used to watch him do it every night when he did that. And I thought he was the coolest dude in the world. I mean, he put that big belt on, just like Elvis had and stuff. He'd get his scarf and everything. And then he'd go out the door and he'd fucking, run across the street. And then they'd do their Elvis show thing. It was super popular. It was huge. People came from all over to see my dad's band. Also, just to check out that Elvis impersonation because that Glenn was so good at it. But he kind of had that look anyway, and I always thought that was super cool. So here's the guys again talking about the Cardinal Lounge. This also was in San Leandro, California. They moved around, like I said, quite a bit through the Bay Area. There's other newspaper clippings that were constantly being written about the band and stuff like that. And that's just another shot of them in those bow ties with those jumpsuits you're looking at there in the picture are actually red. And the group, like I said, did change over the years. You can see they've added a person in this picture I'm showing. Instead of the four of them, we've got a fifth person. And that is John Ponzo, a friend of my uncle's and my dad's. He ended up joining the band and also provided the recording studio when they made their first record. So a little bit of history there with Mr. Ponzo. Great guy. There's a newspaper clipping here I want to read to you. Let's look at this. It says, Shelters are holdover hits. The Shelters, a San Leandro-based dance quintet, is currently appearing in the lounge at the Oakland Holiday Inn Tuesday through Saturday nights. That's a lot of nights of live music. Previous engagements in the same room were successful for the Shelters to the point that they became one of the most popular dance groups ever to appear there. This current engagement is no exception. Now nearing the end of a 2-month run, the engagement has been extended through New Year's Eve and perhaps beyond that. In addition to a large repertoire of contemporary times or tunes, the Shelters dig into oldies but goodies and change the pace up once in a while. A few novelty acts, which would be the Elvis thing, and etc. And Alice Holman, who was also, I believe, that San Francisco Chronicle reporter, she also wrote about them quite a bit in the Bay. So they were getting acknowledged by a lot of different newspaper people and stuff as they played around. The story on that Galaxy Lounge. So that Galaxy Lounge is actually located in the Holiday Inn that was off Hagenberger Road in Oakland. This was very, very close to the Oakland Coliseum. You could throw a rock to it. So it was a very popular place for people to stay. The Oakland Raiders would stay there. Celebrities would stay there. Very popular. And that lounge was very popular. So it was huge for my dad and the guys to be playing that room. And what was kind of cool is I remember being a teenager when I couldn't go into the bar and drink. Me and my best friend Marty would stand outside the door and watch my dad's whole show from the door, just because it was fun to kind of see my uncles and my dad do their thing, and Glenn to do the Elvis thing as well. What was even better than that was they got to know a lot of the Oakland Raiders, because they had Kenny Stabler, Jim Otto, Pete Manizak, guys like that coming into the bar all the time because they were right by the Coliseum and the Raiders would stay there. And they ended up befriending my dad and my uncles. So they knew all the Raiders, and that was like their little spot. They owned that spot. Everybody wanted to go see the Shelters, and they knew that the Oakland Raiders would probably be in there anytime they were in town playing. Want to show you a quick shot here at the Galaxy Lounge, inside the lounge here. So left to right there's my Uncle Ron on the guitar singing. I can't tell who that is next to him. And then my Uncle Dan's on the microphone with the big afro there. But that big black dude right there on the microphone, anybody recognize him? That is Mr. Otis Sistrunk from the Oakland Raiders. I told you they used to go in this bar all the time. They loved my dad and my uncles. And every once in a while, Otis would go up there and sing a song with him and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun for them to play that room. And I remember that room like the back of my hand. I mean, the family was always going there to see the band, and it was always a good night and a crazy night. In fact, I think when they had their record party, when they finally made the record, I think we did it there at the Galaxy Lounge, and we had so many people. It was pretty crazy. So yeah, that was a lot of fun there, and I'll never forget that place. As I said, the guys traveled a little bit. They went all over the place. This particular newspaper clipping I'm showing you here is from Joe Mackey's Star. I believe this was located in Winnemucca, Nevada. I know there's a few truck drivers and a few people that travel that know where Winnemucca is. The Winnemucca, Nevada, it's not like a huge city or anything, but the biggest thing in that town is the Star Casino. So the guys, they played up there for a little bit, and we did a whole little tour through Nevada. What was super cool for me is they let me out of school to travel with the band. And they said, your only homework while you're gone on this little tour is to compile a photo album and a report on your travels, everywhere you went, where the band played and stuff like that. How cool is that? What school ever let you do that? They never let you do it now. I had such a great time, though. And one of the things I remember about that particular showroom was some nights there'd be two people out in the audience, and I would sit on the side of the stage, and they had this velvet red curtain that was electric. So right before the band would come on for their show, the curtain would it would raise up, and I'd be on the side of the stage just kind of looking and kind of in awe of all of it, because I loved watching my uncles and my dad perform. And that's probably where I got the little nick to do it myself. But music was definitely given to me through my father and my uncles. But I would watch that curtain go up, and sometimes there'd be two people out there, and they would play all night to those two people. If it was a slow night and not too many people were there, some nights it was completely packed in there. And I used to tell Dad, how can you do that? I mean, how do you just have two people and say, it doesn't matter. We have a contract. We got to play. So you play to those two people. But you know what? Those two people that night, stayed till the very end. They had a great time. They loved the band. They loved the music. And my uncles and my dad were goofy. So, along with good music and great harmonies and vocals and all that kind of stuff, they were just fun to listen to when they go back and forth. Here's another promotional shot I wanted to show you from the early days of the Shelters. So there's Uncle Glenn looking like Elvis still in the back there. My father in the middle, Steve Freeberg, Schwen, Uncle Schwenny, and then Uncle Danny right there with the afro. The thing that kills me about this picture is I specifically remember these shirts. They were so ugly, but it was 70s, and check it out, they're wearing the white pants. In the 70s, there was a lot of white pants, white belts, and believe it or not, guys, white shoes. And I mean dress shoes. But these particular shirts, I remember so well because they just felt a certain way. And I would put on Dad's shirt sometimes, some of his cool ones. And I just remember that material. So when I look at that picture, I can feel the rayon or whatever whatever it was made out of, and I'll just never forget it. They had a lot of cool things that they did. People did for them. Sometimes there was somebody that made a Shelters calendar for them, and we sold these at the clubs that they were playing when they're on tour and moving around. The Shelters calendar for 1979. And this picture here on YouTube, I'll describe it for you guys on iHeart and Spotify. They're right in front of a white Mercedes-Benz, and they've got those red jumpsuits with the bow ties and everything, and that's Dad leaning on the hood of the Mercedes back there. But they sold a ton of these stupid things, and it was great because everybody wanted something from the Shelters. I think one of the things that made my father and my uncle's band so popular was that they were really friendly and social people, and I guess that's where I get it, but they would go out on the breaks in between sets of the show and stuff and sit with people and talk to them, and the regulars that came to see them, they would sit down and indulge them. And people love that. It's like a restaurant owner who goes out and mingles with the people eating at the restaurant. It's a business, you gotta go talk to people and stuff. So they loved that they were very approachable that way, and they would hang out with them. Some of the promotional shots that they took were taken in lots of different places. This particular one I'm going to throw up right now. Here's the Shelters. So this was taken, and guys, look at this. You see the black jumpsuits? For those of you not on YouTube, they're in black jumpsuits. They kind of look like an Elvis suit with the silver studs up the sides, bell bottoms, white platform shoes. Did you hear what I said? White platform shoes and pink silk shirts underneath. And at that time, believe it or not, that was like cool shit, right? They almost look like Earth, Wind, and Fire or something up there. But this picture, what I want to tell you about it was actually shot on a piece of art in downtown San Francisco, right near the Hyatt Regency. And they did a couple photo shoots out there at the Hyatt Regency. But that's one they used a lot right there. Pretty interesting stuff. And I used to love it because my dad used to say every time they had a photo shoot, he would get a pimple right on the end of his nose. And we used to tease him and go, Dad, you got a photo shoot next week. You're probably going to get a big old pimple. And he would. I think it was nerves, kind of like how I am about some things. Here's a couple more shots. This is from it was actually a Christmas show for a gal named Jody, and I forget her last name. Anyway, she had cancer. It was really, really bad. And my dad's band decided we're going to do a show and send all the proceeds to help her with her cancer treatment and stuff. But I just wanted to show it because, again, here's the whole jumpsuit thing. This was very popular in the 70s, you guys. All the bands kind of looked like this. If you go back and look at some of the bands, you'll see. My Aunt Nadine, who was married to my Uncle Dan for a couple of years, she made most of these jumpsuits. She was a really, really good sewer. And a lot of those jumpsuits that you're seeing in these pictures, she made. This one in particular kind of cracks me up. Right now I'm showing a picture of them in white jumpsuits with the white platforms. And Dad's got his keyboard out there on the side of a mountain, sitting on a rock. Uncle Ron with his guitar there. Uncle Danny with the big fro in the middle. And then, of course, Uncle Glenn with his drum, the Elvis guy. What's funny about this is when you look at it, doesn't it look like KC and the Sunshine Man? I'm your boogeyman. I'm your boogeyman. We used to tease them about that all the time. But this was a great shot, and this promotional shot got used a lot in the newspaper clippings and a lot of other places. It was actually taken at Lake Chabot Park, which is in my hometown in Castro Valley, California, up in the East Bay. And I just loved it. I thought it was a great, great shot. And then I told you I was going to show you a picture of my Uncle Glenn doing his full on Elvis thing. So check it out. Here you go. Look at this thing, you guys. So there's Glenn doing his Elvis act. Pretty amazing. Look at the detail on the suit. Look at the detail on the belt, the eagle on the front. He made all these by hand. And growing up as a kid, I watched Glenn do Elvis so many times that when Elvis passed, I felt like my Uncle Glenn had passed. He just was Elvis to me. There's an old story when we were doing the tour of all the casinos in Nevada. My Uncle Glenn had given me a little shot of moonshine. I forget what kind of moonshine it was, but Dad didn't know, and he gave me a little shot of that. And the guys were on an off day screwing around in this big house they gave us. And it was an old house. It was a creepy old house. We found a hidden stairwell in there that led to the kitchen, all kinds of weird stuff. In fact, I was always freaked out to sleep in that house at night. But at one point, Glenn had a BB gun, and he was shooting it down from the stairwell, and it clipped off my neck or something, and Dad got really mad at him, and they're like, you guys need to knock it off. Well, they were all toasted from the moonshine and stuff. But a lot of good memories with Uncle Glenn on that tour through Nevada and stuff. And again, the Elvis thing was just so much fun to watch, and he was just really amazing. So you can see he was a pretty good one there. So they had a couple other friends my dad kind of had known for years, Bob Cummins and his wife, and they had made different music with different people moving around and stuff. But eventually they did a song they released on a 45. So now you know how old we are. So there's the 45 I'm showing on the screen now. And it says, you gave me a mountain, Bob Cummins. And his wife, Avalon, is the one that sang with him and stuff. But if you look real closely on the label of the 45 there, it says background accompanied by the Oliveris brothers. Well, that would be my dad, William Oliveris, my uncle Danny Oliveris, my uncle Ronnie Oliveris. So they actually made a record before their record, and it was this little 45 that they did with their friend. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I think somebody still has that record. And I have heard it, and it was pretty cool. And you can definitely tell the voices of my uncles and my dad in the background on that. So they finally got to make their own record. They met this guy, Larry Tallarico was his name. He was like the Bay Area guy to go get your hair cut from, because in this day, and I don't remember what year it was, but the guys were getting ready to make their album, and they wanted their hair cut for the album cover and all this great stuff. So Larry Tallarico became their barber. And we would go to his place, and he had this weird way. Even I went to him. Yes, I had hair. I did get it cut. He would measure your hair every time you went in. And he did some weird thing where he cut your hair based on, when he'd measure it and how much longer it got on this side or up front or in the back or whatever. And then he'd put you under these hot lights when you get done. It just made you feel like you're going through movie star treatment and stuff. But I'm not going to lie, his hair came out pretty good for those styles in that time. So here's a shot of the album cover right here, the final product. This would become the very front of the Shelters album, which was a full album. And then from left to right here, you got my Uncle Ron. You got a guy named Jack Baptista, my father, in the middle there. John Ponzo, I mentioned earlier. And then my Uncle Danny there at the very end with his big fro. And it's always funny that Danny had that fro because he was a bass player. So he would always be boom, 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 boom. He reminded me of one of the guys in the rock band Boston, those guys. Even Lindsey Buckingham back in the day with the big hair. So there's their album cover there, the final product. And again, they went to black Angel Flight suits, if anybody remembers Angel Flights, very popular in that day. And then, of course, their little star-studded vests. I think they look like the Oak Ridge Boys or something here, don't you? Cracks me up. Still a great picture, though. And of course, all their little hairs are perfect because that Larry Tallarico guy was doing their hair for that. And I always kind of enjoyed that album. Do I still? I do. Let me see. I'm going to show it to you. Hold on. Oh, I can hear you. It's actually right here. James Rice was here for a podcast, and he was noticing it too. So here's the actual album, The Shelters. And then on the back were all the credits. And there's actually another shot. Try not to get the line. And there it is, list of the songs and stuff. So they wrote a couple of their own songs on this album. And then, of course, they did a couple covers and stuff. It was selling in the Record Factory stores all over the Bay and the East Bay. And it was kind of fun as a kid or a teenager going into the record store and seeing your dad's record on the shelf right there. I always thought that was pretty fun. So I wanted to show you this as well. So those of you that are musicians will know what this is. This is a picture of a B3 organ. A B3 organ is very big and very heavy, and it had a Leslie amplifier. The Leslie amplifier had this horn thing in the bottom of it that would spin, make this weird kind of effect with it. But the B3 organ, my dad started playing this as the band got more popular. They liked using this for sound. The only thing I hated was moving it, because me and my best friend Marty Grunke were kind of the roadies for these guys, and we had to move that big beast, and it was nuts. If you don't know what a B3 organ is, they have a great, great sound to them. There's still a few running around. You could probably see. One of the bands, I want to say, if you go back to some of the big, big bands in the 70s, Three Dog Night used a B3 organ. Lots of big bands had a B3 organ. It had a bunch of buttons there and stuff like that. And this is actually, excuse me, this is actually a picture I found for my father because he loved that B3, and that's up in his music room in his home. And I would find little things like that over the years to give to Dad as Christmas or birthday presents. This is actually a shot of the band that ended up on the back of the album cover. And I like this one a little bit better than the actual front cover of the album. I just like the pose and everything. But again, left to right, you can see my Uncle Ronnie, and there's my dad. Uncle Danny with his big fro in the middle this time. Jack Baptiste on the right, and in the middle there, John Ponzo. Great picture, though. Really great picture. And I think those are probably two of my most favorite pictures of the band as far as the promotional shots and things that they did over the years. My father was meticulous at keeping track of expenses. So gas, anything that had to do with them traveling. I mean, they went as far as to British Columbia, Canada. They went all over the place and played music. They did lots of unique, cool things. My father had a very, very wonderful life. And it's pretty cool because years later, when he wasn't doing music anymore and he married my stepmother, Cindy, they traveled quite a bit. And they have about, 20 photo albums full of trips they took, cruises and, just everywhere, Italy. And so I'm very grateful that he got to live so much more after his working years, at the waterfront playing music and get to see the world. My father loved to travel. He loved nature. He loved being outside. But he was very meticulous, like I said, at keeping track of everything they spent. I've looked through a couple of his ledgers and stuff from when they were on the road with the band, and Dad had everything in there. Lunch cost this. Gas was this much. Everything itemized. And he's always been good at that his whole life. And I don't think he was OCD. I think maybe the OCD for him maybe came later, but I definitely have it, and maybe I got it from him. I'm not sure. But talking about how meticulous he was, here's just something very interesting. He would collect the hotel keys from all the hotels they stayed at. This is just a few of them here. What I want to do is pull up. Yeah, okay, so you got the Shamrock Motel there, and it's kind of hard to read where that one is. Here's a hotel key for room 252 at the Roadway Inn in Redding, California. The Russell Inn Motor Hotel, and that looks like, I don't know, I can't see where that is. You got the Holiday Inn there, room 158. Of course, that's Hagenberger Road, Oakland, California. I just talked about the Holiday Inn. They had several different rooms, but the main room was room 158. It was the closest to the lounge for them to take their breaks and go back to the hotel room and then get back into the lounge to start the next set for their show. So I remember that room very, very well. It was almost like their home away from home. The Holiday Inn next to the Oakland Coliseum. I mean, that was pretty much their home base. Let's say you got another key from the Rialto Hotel there. This one is Beaver Hotel. And then just from all over, and he kept all these. Here's Kelso Motel, Hyatt, Seattle, Washington. And I thought this was kind of cool because Dad put them all in like a shadow box thing, or at least the ones that he could fit in there. And then, of course, he had a bunch more, and most of them ended up in like photo albums and things like that. But I always thought that was kind of cool. And again, that's something that hangs in his music room in his home. And I'll show you some shots of that in a minute. So, all this musicality and stuff, I was talking about Dad's baby grand piano. We grew up with that piano in the house, right? We had this little house behind that grocery store I was talking about. And I remember playing with my Matchbox cars underneath the baby grand while Dad was practicing Satin Doll or whatever he was learning at the time. My father loved playing piano, and we were always making him play. If someone came to the house, even years later, when he got older, he would sit and play for people. And that's something you never got tired of. And I'm really kind of sad I'm not going to see him or hear him play that piano anymore. But I hear it in my heart and I hear it in my soul. So it's pretty amazing. So you wonder why the people that know me know that I like to sing. I like to get up there and do stuff myself. So when I was a little bit younger, I moved up to Portland, Oregon for a little while and got a job up there. And I met a group of guys. Most of them were from the Bay Area. And we actually started our own original band called That's That. This is just a quick shot just to show you that music runs in the family. Left to right, that's going to be Chris Roberts on the left, Bob Calhoun next to him. In the middle, Dave Myrovich, and believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that is me, Chuck Oliveris, on the right. Look at that hair. I don't know what to say about that hair. We look like a bunch of gangsters, but it was a great time. I sang lead with that band. We wrote a lot of original tunes. We did some covers as well. Had a lot of fun up there in Portland with these guys. It was cool that Dave was from the East Bay. Bobby loved Portland. He was up there. I think he was raised up there, and so was Chris. But here's another shot of us. And look at that skinny tie I've got on. And we were called That's That. And we had a great time with that. And so the music just ran in the family. My cousin Matt plays bass. He's been in a couple bands himself. He also sings. So, I mean, when you're raised around music like that, everybody sings. My Aunt Loretta and my Uncle Frank, he was Hawaiian. His last name was Keohi. And he would sing Hawaiian songs. He would play ukulele and sing Hawaiian songs in the family living room on Christmas and stuff like that. So there was music represented all the time. I mean, if I think back to when Mom and Dad were married, and the vinyls they had next to the fireplace were like the Carpenters, Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life, Woodstock. I mean, just a collection of all kinds of different music. Dad played in a country band at one point. He played in a little bit of a jazzy thing, the pop thing. So like most musicians, you move around and you change up once in a while. Something funny I wanted to show you right here of my dad. Check him out. So here's a picture of my dad. He's got these cool Foster Grant looking sunglasses on and that nice suit. This is as the shelters were progressing in their popularity. And people started to call my dad Hollywood Willie. Willie was my dad's nickname. His name was William Angel Oliveris, but everybody called him Willie or Hollywood Willie in these days. So he kind of started wearing the sunglasses as part of a trademark, but it cracks me up when I look at it now. I'm trying to think, who does he look like? Kind of Jim Jones. Come drink the Kool-Aid. But again, he was always cool. I mean, my dad was just a cool cat. He always was. Here's another shot with the whole group, and here's Dad with his little Hollywood Willie sunglasses on. And then you got my Uncle Jimmy down front with Uncle Ron. Look at my Uncle Ronnie's hair. That's crazy. And he still has a lot of hair. He's lucky. One of the other promotional shots that was always one of my favorite ones, I told you they would sometimes go to San Francisco and go to different locations to get their shots for the band. This particular one I'm showing right now, there's the pink shirts I was kind of trying to tell you about in the other picture. I think it was a newspaper clipping with the black jumpsuits. This is on the inside of the Hyatt Regency San Francisco. There's a big thing of art in there, and they took that shot in there. And this actually got used quite a bit as well. So you can see KC and the Sunshine Band. You can see the 70s, you can just hear the music, right? But I'm telling you, they were good and they were entertaining. And I think that's what made them so popular. Popular enough to get an agent and send them up to Canada and travel around and do the casinos and things like that and make the record. They never hit it huge, big time, but they were doing it and they were out there and they were well known. So it was a lot of fun for them and it was fun for us. Something else I want to share with you. There was a time when they got booked on the Princess Cruises. So my father was a huge fan of Lou Rawls. Some of you probably don't remember who Lou Rawls is, but here's a picture of my dad and my Uncle Dan partying with Lou Rawls on the Princess Cruise when they were playing with him on that ship. And it's kind of a cool picture because those of you that don't remember who Lou Rawls was, he's passed now, but you would probably remember him mostly from a song called You'll Never Find Another Love Like Mine. That was him. That was Lou Rawls. And there he is and hanging out with my dad and Danny. And my dad loved that because Dad did one of his tunes called Groovy People in one of the acts with the band all the time. So I thought that was pretty cool. They got to hang out and meet him and do that gig on the Princess Cruise with them. So here's something else I gave my father on either Christmas or a birthday. It is the actual drawings and specs on a baby grand piano. And of course, I gave him that because of his baby grand that he had since he was 19 years old. And this was just another thing that he added to his music room. I thought it was a cool gift. And, he played his all the time. I told you he had that piano redone. I'm going to show it to you right now. This is the actual piano my dad bought when he was 19 years old. That's in his home right there. And he had it redone. And it's beautiful. And I can't believe this is the same piano that my 63-year-old ass used to play underneath with my Matchbox when I was like 7 and 8 and whatnot. But it was a beautiful piano. It still is. All redone now. And I believe my brother Joey is going to be taking possession of that now that Dad's gone. And Joey is a musician as well. Most of us have something to do with music, but pretty cool. You can kind of see the love for music and the love for what Dad did with the band and his brothers and stuff when you just gander through his music room at his home. This is just a couple shots. Some of the stuff I've been showing you and talking about is on the wall in here. Not everything, because not everything would fit on a wall in there. But this is his little studio. You can see that 45 record up there. And of course, the classic keyboard he always had there. Dad would go in here after retiring and just play and play and play for hours. And one of the things I enjoyed was when I would go over, he'd always go in there, call me in there. Come on, Chuck, do this song, do that song or whatnot. In fact, Dalton was telling me right after he passed, we went in there so I could get some shots of this. And he said, the last piece of music on the stand there that Dad was playing was My Funny Valentine. And I'm pretty sure I was doing that with him before he couldn't play anymore. And it wasn't that long. But I know that bummed him out because he had problems with his motor skills and stuff after a while. And that was kind of sad when you love music as much as he did. Here's another shot of the music room. That's a big poster that somebody had made and they've all signed it there. And as I said, the band changed over the years. I'm going to show you a picture right now with my Uncle Dan there from left to right, Uncle Ronnie, and then my dad. I don't know who the dude is next to my dad, but I know that's Paul Corvarelli on the end there. So, like I said, over the years, guys would come and go, and the band would change. And after a while, one of my uncles, Uncle Ron, kind of bailed out of the band, didn't want to do it anymore and stuff. And then Dad and Uncle Danny went on to do other things. Here's another shot of the revised Shelters years later, where they had a female singer who was kind of brought into the group. And then Mike Naraki is the young kid in the background here, the picture. Excuse me. So, like I said, they would change as they had to because all bands change. And I feel like this may be wrong. I should ask my friend James Rice this with Paris on Fire. But I felt like my dad's band always had an issue with the drummers. They couldn't keep a drummer. They were always swapping drummers out. Uncle Glenn was, I think, one of their first drummers. And, he was great. And they didn't have any issues with him. I think he just moved and went up to Reno or something. But these other guys, no, not so much. They just didn't work out. So over the years, Dad wanted to keep playing music, had to keep scaling down. It was a 5-piece at one time, became a 4-piece, and then it became a trio. So a picture I'm throwing up right now is a young kid that they brought into the band, Mark Cepeda, and then my Uncle Danny in the middle there, and then my father on the right. But you can see they just had to keep changing with the times. And even after that, they had to go down to 2 other guys. My Uncle Dan left the band, and then it was just my dad. So he formed another little trio with these guys here, which I'm showing on the screen right now. So it just kept having to change and stuff. And then they decided to do 50s music. So they became the Yak Tones later in the years. You see my dad in the front there. And then there's the 2 other guys. And they started doing like 50s stuff in that one. So changing with the times, like every other band, times change. So does everything else. Here's just a shot of the album cover in the studio, in Dad's studio at home. And of course, another promotional shot for yet another band when Uncle Danny was still there. And you got Dad and Uncle Danny in the middle, and then these 2 other guys on the end there. But the 50s thing was fun because the 50s thing, they got to do, obviously, 50 songs. I dig 50 songs. I like singing them a lot, but there's a lot of doo-wop and stuff. So they went to a 50s thing with the Yak Tones. The Yak Tones eventually brought on 3 more people. So now they had 6. And in the picture I'm showing you right now, you can see my dad and Uncle Danny there with the sunglasses on. And then 4 other new guys they brought into the band. And to be honest with you, I don't even remember their names, but I do remember that band. And I remember the 50s thing was kind of fun. Here's another shot of Yakety Yak. Yakety Yak. Don't talk back. So there they are, and they did the 50s thing. It was kind of cool. It was like a little nod to the 50s. And one of those guys was a sax player. It's always nice to have a sax player if you're going to do the 50s music and stuff like that. So quite a few things, quite a few bands over the years. I know my father missed the music business when he couldn't do it anymore. But that's why he had his little studio in his music room at home, such as I have here in my podcast room, and I sing over there. A man needs his space. You know what I mean? I know he missed doing the music. Like I said, it ran through the family. I'll show you a picture of the family here, some of it anyway. In this picture from left to right on the couch is my Uncle Danny, my Uncle Ronnie, my Aunt Loretta, and my dad. So Auntie Loretta's the oldest. My Uncle Danny has passed already. Now Dad has passed. So now we just have my Uncle Ron. And, it's kind of sad, but, such is life. In the background there is myself, my stepmother, Cindy, my Uncle Ron's wife, Auntie Karen, and my Uncle Danny's wife, Aunt Wendy. And it's just great to see that even when those guys got older, the 3 brothers had a blast together. And they were trouble. If there was a Raider game on, you didn't even want to walk in front of the TV. Us kids got yelled at. It was like, get away. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. But we learned to live with it. So they never got a gold record. But just for kicks, one year on Christmas, I bought Dad this online. And you can see it says this record is awarded to the Shelters and William Oliveras for 1 million copies sold. No, it's not real, but it looks pretty damn cool. So he threw it up in his music room, and you'd be surprised how many people were like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. No, they didn't sell 1 million copies. They tried. They were out there. They were doing it, but they didn't. So he's a very special guy, my father, very well liked by everybody. I couldn't have asked for a better father. I'm a little devastated that he's gone. 1 week ago today, on Super Bowl Sunday, probably somewhere around 6:15 p.m. he passed away, but me and Dalton got to go in there and sit with him, and we were holding his hand and talking to him for about 45 minutes. He couldn't communicate back to us, but he knew we were there. He was squeezing our hand and all that. And I had already said what I needed to say to my dad, and he had already said what he needed to say to me. So I felt complete in that way before he passed. And I was kind of sad that some of my other siblings didn't get that. So I was very fortunate to get that. But me and Dad were good, and I enjoyed every minute we sat in his music room and tried to learn new music and stuff. And it was just a good time. I mean, music was everything. So I thank my father for that. I thank him for the music, and I thank him for being such a great dad. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do this podcast, but I think I'm doing pretty good. I want to share this with you. He was a great grandfather. All the little grandchildren loved my dad. I mean, he was constantly playing with the kids, and here he is at his piano. So a great father, a fun musician, a good singer, and just an all-around great guy. And I know that other people don't have that kind of thing, you know what I mean, with their parents, but I did. So I'm very, very lucky. He was definitely the favorite grandpa. And like I said, even over the years after he couldn't play anymore and stuff like that, when people would come to the house, we'd beg Dad, please play that piano. Please sit down and play your piano. And he would. He always would. So anytime there was any kind of a gathering at his home, he'd get on the baby grand that he bought when he was 19, and he'd play for them. This is a shot of my mother-in-law, Gloria, with my dad. And look at her and the way he's smiling. He loved to do it. He knew it made him feel good. And so that's pretty awesome. I have nothing but amazing memories of my father. Wanted to share his life with you because I thought it was pretty cool. He was a pretty amazing guy. One of the things that I thought was so cool was, check this out, you guys. As we were leaving the hospital on Super Bowl Sunday, the nurse there gave this to us. So what you're seeing in the picture is a little glass, like vial thing with like an electronic scroll in it. That is my father's last heartbeat. And then that thumbprint on the heart is his thumbprint. I have never seen a hospital do that. And I think it was just this one particular nurse, and she gave it to the four of us who just happened to be there when he passed that night. How amazing is that? I've never seen anybody do that. I like that idea. I'm going to have that scroll made into a necklace. And then I thought it might be kind of cool because I like tattoos to have his last heartbeat tattooed on me with his dates and stuff. But I just thought that was really, really amazing. So that's my dad, you guys. William Angel Oliveras, June 19th, 1940 to February 9th, 2025. Love you, Dad. And now it's time to do something we haven't done in a while. Thank you for listening to my podcast and letting me share my father with you because it means a lot to me. We're going to do something we haven't done in a while because I told you guys I was going to review these, but guess what? We got a new product to review at the end of the podcast right here. I told you guys about it, I don't know, maybe 2 episodes ago. It is these Post Oreos. You guys are going, what's a Post Oreo? So I told you about these, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago or something. Post Malone got together with Oreo Cookie, designed several cookies, and these are Oreos that he designed, and they are, it says, Posties swirled salted caramel and shortbread flavored cream. Oh my God. And the designs are like guitar picks and different things on the cookies. So we're going to review them because I told you I would. And they're already in the stores. I believe I saw it in Walmart. Let's go ahead and get one out here. See what you think. Sorry. Crank that down. Okay. Ooh. Okay. So different than the other Oreos, you've got the chocolate side. And then I believe this is going to be the shortbread side. And then inside, where you would normally have, okay, this is the swirl. Some of them are guitar picks and other things that Posty designed. Post Malone something else, isn't he? Now you got Oreo cookies as a partner. So let's try the Post Malone Oreo cookie shortbread swirled salted caramel cookie. Oh my God. Yeah. I ain't gonna lie. Bomb. I will be saving these to go with my milk tonight. Hey, check them out. They're out in the stores. They're delicious. If you like, salted caramel and shortbread, oh, come on. You can't beat it, right? Post Malone Oreo cookies. I'm Chuck Oliveris. This is We Need to Talk About This. We're coming back next Tuesday with another podcast. And I wanted to thank you again for tuning in, listening, letting me share my father with you, because I feel like he was a pretty amazing human being. Love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.